We are a group of friends, bound by our appreciation for liberty and good podcasting. Free-minded thinkers from all walks of life, our values come together with one accord to discuss the common culture and news of the day, along with whatever random crap is going on in our lives. Welcome to the Union of the Unknowns.
Welcome to the latest exciting episode of Union of the Unknowns. And we have a great cast of unknowns for you again today. I'm going to call you all out, and if you could all say hello in your own unique fashion, that would be great. So from left to right on my screen, we have Bruce C.
Hey, everybody. I'm here.
Thank you. And then we have Ashley, Think, Change, Repeat.
Hey, how you doing?
Keel Thor.
Greetings from the suburban outskirts of Atlanta, Georgia.
Nicely said. Jacqueline, ATL Connector, who's in a car at the moment, I think. Stella Q from the land of Oz.
Hello, I'm representing the Southern Hemisphere here. I have a great weight on my shoulders.
I'm very welcome, you are too. And Toons from the Toonstead.
From the free state of New Hampshire, representing the 603. How are you?
And finally me, Terry, aka Terrence, or Terry Canary, who's going to briefly hand over to Keel Thor, who's going to tell us something very interesting about nuclear power, which is our topic for today.
Thank you, Terrence. So we have been talking about, well, we briefly talked about nuclear war in the past episode. And my brother is a health physicist. He's got degrees in physics and health physics, and he works in the nuclear industry. And so I talked to him, and he gave me a little write-up about stuff that we all can do as normal folks to prepare for, and in the event of a nuclear attack, nuclear war, you know, the whole big apocalypse thing we have had in our heads for the past, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, something like that. What we can do to kind of survive and make it. So
can I just ask, does it involve putting your head between your legs and kissing your ass goodbye?
You know what? If you live in one of the cities that is probably a major target, that's probably the best thing you can do.
Right.
The only thing you can do.
What about getting under a desk? A school desk? I'm made to understand that would be helpful.
If it's a school desk built in the 40s and 50s, maybe so. But the way they make them these days, I'm sure.
Well, they're like masks. You have to wear two.
Right.
And my desk protects your desk?
Two desks.
Two desks.
Yeah.
Desk
You
up.
got to wear two desks, yeah. It was a door in the UK. You had to get under a door. I think you had to take it off the hinges first, which was, perhaps a bit of a challenge when the balloon went up. But
you see the flash coming and run out and get your tools.
Get your screwdriver,
Well, Keel, before you get started, I did want to ask if you maybe wanted to go over just briefly, like, what is a scenario that we're talking about? And I don't mean just like one bomb, but like sort of the whole mutually assured destruction situation that could impact, a nation or many nations versus just one isolated city, which would obviously be bad enough.
So you're talking about our current situation involving Russia and Ukraine and China and Taiwan and all these little tripwires that are just waiting to be tripped. So in my opinion, we're probably, I bet we won't even see it coming. As regular folks sitting here in your homes, I think it's just going to be a flash of light, whether we even acknowledge, if our brain can process that in the amount of time, and then it's all going to be gone. Because if once the nukes start flying, no nation that has nukes is going to sit down and think about it. They're not going to say, well, we're going to let Russia send a nuke and hit Washington, and that'll be it. You know, we're going to send nukes into Russia, and then they're going to respond again, or maybe everything will just fly all at once. But it's not just going to be an isolated incident, in my opinion. It's all going to happen. If it happens at all, it's all going to happen at once. You could probably argue now that Russia has held their elections in the Donbass region, and that's, according to them, officially part of Russia now.
Mm-hmm.
And they can say, okay, we're not invading Ukraine anymore. We're defending Russia. And they start using some of their tactical battlefield nukes that people have been talking about in Ukraine. Maybe that's a different situation. But if Russia ever feels so pinned back that because of NATO and America reinforcing Ukraine and pouring all of our money and weapons into Ukraine, we're basically fighting a war with Russia already. If Russia says, I've had enough, America is the problem, not Ukraine, and they send a nuke to America, then it's all over. That's how I see things. But anyway, that would be a scenario. Let's assume that I'm wrong and all-out
Yes, please.
nuclear war does not wipe everybody off the face of the planet all at once.
Right.
There are things to do and things before and after a nuclear attack that could help mitigate your chances of survival. So I'm just going to read down this paper that my brother made up for me. So the first thing he did was defined bomb fallout as radioactive particulates or dust created by a fission event, an atomic bomb, that are transported downwind and eventually deposited on surfaces, causing contamination. That's what we're looking at. Radioactive dust. That's the problem. He lists the dangers in order of the highest hazard to lowest. Number one is the inhalation of the airborne fallout. Don't want to inhale it. Don't want to breathe the stuff in. The ingestion of contaminated food or water. Number three, skin exposure from contamination on the body or clothing. Number four, external radiation emanating from ground contamination. So just things to keep in mind. These are the ways that you can be hurt by radiation after a bomb has gone off. Some things he notes here. Fallout may or may not be visible as dust particles. So you may not even know it's around you. Contamination is easily spread through contact with contaminated surfaces. And children, including unborn children, are more sensitive to radiation exposure than adults. That's something probably most people don't know.
I didn't know that.
Then he gives a list of tips to reduce exposure. He says, first of all, don't panic. Hey, if you survived the immediate blast effects and were far enough away to not receive a significant direct radiation dose, then the worst part is over, he says. The hazards from fallout are not likely to be immediately life-threatening. The goal now is to reduce your exposure to radiation in order to limit increased cancer risk.
Right.
He says, next, keep an eye on local weather conditions. Better to be upwind than downwind. So pay attention to how storms normally travel through your system, through your area. I know in Georgia, they kind of sweep westward, south, or like from northwest and loop, do like a curve through the metro Atlanta area and then head up towards the Carolinas. That's kind of how they flow.
Can I just add, I would recommend not watching CNN weather people if you want to know what the weather's really doing.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Says
Or the Weather Bureau, for that matter.
The Weather Bureau?
Sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry to interrupt there. I have noticed in Australia here that Bureau of Meteorology, which is our go-to for weather, often says one thing, and reality out there says something completely different, and it's happening a
Absolutely.
lot.
Mm.
Please continue.
He says, move far away from potential targets and upwind if you get plenty of advance notice. If you can't get away, then shelter in place. Stay inside, turn off your ventilation system if feasible. Close all doors and windows. Fill containers with tap water prior to the fallout reaching the location of your local water treatment plant. That's a good point to make, because you may not think about it, but your water is exposed to external elements before it gets to your house a lot of times. So you need to make sure you have water already on hand.
And
Well, that's dependent upon having some warning, isn't it?
It certainly does. It says
And-
if you are, and this pertains to you, Toons, if you are on well water, you should be able to safely use that for the immediate future.
Great. Maybe Toons would be better off climbing down the well, actually, and then he'd have the water supply on hand, and he'd also have a nice shelter from the
Yeah, there you
go. Don't tell him.
nuclear bomb.
Don't reveal my escape plan.
You'll need a
Keel,
really long straw, man.
Yes,
Keel,
Ashley.
question. So as in the or do we have a definition of like what is the immediate region? You know what I mean? Like, or like the high target, for example, of being in, obviously Atlanta could be potentially targeted. So if that were the case, how far outside of those city limits would be considered like directly in the fallout, or do we know?
Well, he does not address that directly in this document, but I know that that really depends on the size of the bomb that's
Yeah.
exploded.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh, okay.
I want to.
It also,
For some reason, I want to say something like a radius of 30 miles.
I think that's right.
Is
If
that
it's a
average?
hydrogen bomb, it's a. I remember thinking when I was in London that I wouldn't be safe pretty much anywhere in the greater metropolitan area. So yeah, I think a hydrogen bomb would take out whole of London straight
Yeah.
away, more or less. And yeah, as
it's
you
also
say,
very
fallout depends very much on the weather, on the wind. So
Sure.
sorry, Terry. It's
That's all
also
right.
very dependent upon where it has been detonated, because it has a lot to do with things. If it's detonated a long way up, like 2,600 feet or whatever, it's going to have a much
Yep.
different effect
Yep.
than if it's detonated at a much lower level. And a lot of that is to do with the wave, which I'm trying to remember what it's called. The wave that it's like the shock wave sort of thing. So that
shockwave, yeah.
has a lot to do with it.
Damn.
Yeah, and I think ground bursts are worse for nuclear fallout because they throw a lot of contaminated earth into the air, which gets distributed as fallout. I've got a feeling that in the Japanese bombs, one was an air burst and one was a ground burst, but don't quote me on that.
So,
Oh,
well, and the other question, and I don't know if anyone here knows all possibilities, but I wasn't really aware of this. So how many different types of nukes are there?
the ones that were dropped on Japan during World War II are very different from the ones they have nowadays. And I can't give you the technical differences, but they're much smaller back then. Nowadays,
Yeah,
they're much bigger.
I can say a bit about that. They were what they call atomic bombs or fission bombs. So they were using, I think one used uranium and one used plutonium.
Mhm.
But now they have hydrogen bombs, which are fusion bombs, which are immensely more powerful. And they're the ones you see in the films which Stella was talking about the other day, blowing up small, unfortunate islands in the South Pacific. Yep. And they actually use an atom bomb, a fission bomb, as a kind of trigger device to set off the fusion reaction. So you get the worst of all possible worlds, really. So, and they are enormously powerful, much, much more powerful than the bombs that were set off in Japan in the Second World War. I can't remember how much, but orders of magnitude greater.
It was the ones in Japan were kilotons. The ones they have now are megatons. So
That's right. Yeah.
that gives you a bit of a sense of scale. But so when I say I don't think we're going to see it coming, that's because one bomb, like I said, I think the average is something like a 30-mile radius gets wiped out immediately. So there are the United States has thousands of these bombs, and Russia has thousands of these bombs. If they were to launch them all at once, there's, I mean,
There'd be one less planet in the universe
right. I mean, it would
if
it
that
would just
exists.
scour the earth of all life, basically.
Very likely. Do you think there's any prospect of a limited nuclear war that, you know, because they have tactical nukes now, don't they?
Right.
Like battlefield nukes.
Yeah. That would be if Russia decided to do that. I don't think that would necessarily trigger us launching nukes at Russia, because they're kind of small, localized. It's not like it would wipe out. I mean, it would just be a smaller version of the terrible thing we all dread. But I don't know if we would launch our nukes at Russia, because obviously if they're launching a battlefield nuke in Ukraine, they're not targeting the United States or our strict allies. And it's, you know, we're not in danger necessarily.
I don't know if you guys know this, but during the Cold War, the NATO strategy was for first strike of nuclear weapons. So if there was a scenario where Russia was going to invade West Germany, as it was then, for example, the NATO strategy was for the first launch of nuclear weapons. So that was you know, that was a well-known strategy. So they weren't going to wait for the Russians to launch first. Their strategy was always to launch first.
Right. So anyway, that's the scenario that's possible right now. And I don't know how, well, I don't want to diverge too far away. Let me get through this list and then we can discuss the possibilities. The next thing he says is have plenty of non-perishable food. Obviously, that's something we all do as preppers, and you know, that's not. He says, all right, here's the next thing. Take potassium iodide as soon as you find out about an impending attack or immediately after the blast, but before the fallout reaches your location. He says, this can protect your thyroid from exposure due to radioactive iodine, which can be particularly dangerous. It only protects against that one radioactive element, though, and only works if taken prior to exposure.
Yep.
Next, if you must go outside, and I'll add also that that's important for pregnant people that can carry babies.
Right.
Birthing.
Nice.
Because it will also, I think I've heard it also protects the unborn child's thyroid as well, you know.
I think the term you're looking for is birthing person.
That's it. That's what I was going
Person,
with. Thank
yes.
you. If you must go outside wearing a tightly fit, I'm going to say NIOSH, but I'm sure it's NIOSH. I don't know what the common way to.
That's typical. NIOSH is
NIOSH certified respirator with a P100 HEPA filter cartridge will help reduce the amount of inhaled contamination. I know Toons, you're familiar with that sort of equipment.
So you're saying you can't just put a cloth mask on your face?
No, you
and it'll
can't put a
protect
cloth
you
mask
against-
because those
just
don't do
like-
anything.
Wow, that's amazing.
Those are just decoration for your face. That's all a cloth mask does. He says,
No
in this
comment.
scenario,
No,
in this
no comment.
scenario-
No comment.
oh, okay. Remove
Sorry,
remove
buddy.
your clothes upon entering your house. Seal them in a garbage bag and throw it outside. Then
I do that anyway.
Right. Then bathe with clean water as soon as possible, because your clothes are going to collect all the dust and you don't want it sitting around, obviously. Your area. Now here he goes into a little bit of what to expect the authorities might do. Your
God.
area may be evacuated
with
at some
this.
point. Have all your important documents and quote, can't live without it essentials gathered and ready to go. So a bug out bag, again, we all have that. You may not be allowed back for months or possibly years. Also, you and your belongings may be checked for contamination by first responders using radiation detection equipment.
Right. I had a sort of dry run for this, of course, last year with my volcano that went off.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Did you experience any sort of trouble? I mean, did everything as far as the evacuation went pretty smoothly for you, as far as I can
Well,
tell?
we got
or-
out before we got out before, you know, the Volk. So that in this, the analogy would be to get out before the bomb was launched.
Mhm.
So we got out before the volcano went off. So we avoided all the sort of traffic jams, and I think it was pretty stressful for the people that got involved in the last minute evacuation. But we were on the other side of the island by then, fortunately.
Because you were not wasting any time. You felt just intuitively, you're like, I feel like when we were having that conversation, look, these rumblings are far too close together for our comfort. We're just
Yeah.
going to go ahead and get out.
We were looking
that
at the
right?
data. We were looking at the data. There's a sort of COVID lesson here as well. We were looking at the data and analyzing the data, and we could work out exactly what was happening. So, you know, we weren't going to wait for the experts telling us their opinion. We knew what was going to happen. We knew it was coming close, and we knew it was coming very soon. So we got out 2 hours before, fortunately.
My first question with that is, what did you bring in your bug out bag, and what do you wish you had brought, or what do you wish you had purchased
Spain's a very
previous?
bureaucratic society, so we ended up taking a lot of documents. Really, half the car was full of documents, you know, and I didn't actually have very many clothes with me, so we had to. Fortunately, people were donating things, so we had to go to local donation centres, and I was able to get some clothes there. But I don't know, really. I mean, we lost a lot of our prepping stuff. You know, we had a lot of food stored, and because of what happened to the house, that got lost. So that was a bit of a downer. But really, I suppose my lesson for the bug out bag is you don't really need as much as you may think. You know, you can survive on very little. But I mean, our situation was different. We were going to a place, you know, we were still in civilization. We were on the other side of the island. We had shops and things. I think in a nuclear war, things are going to be somewhat different. So, you know, you might be relying on yourselves much more. So I suppose ideally you'd have some sort of bug out place in the mountains somewhere where you can, with your dried food, where you could go and hide out.
And a spare
Has
tracksuit.
anyone got any good tips for nuclear war survival?
Yeah, pray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if you're in a blast radius, I don't think there's much you can do about it. There's probably a lot of Japanese people that can tell you about that.
I would probably just grab a beer, take a seat, enjoy the show at that point.
Yeah,
There's a lot to be said for that. Yeah.
I'm with you on that. I like.
Yeah, because
go ahead, Stella.
sorry, Keels. Some of those things that you're reading out, as valid as they are, how long is that going to last? You know, take a bath, wash yourself off. You got to let the bath water out. Then what? You've drunk your water. Then what? You've taken your clothes off. You're inside. The windows are shut. Then what? That's going to last maybe a week. You know, don't mean to be a downer, but that is the reality. It's only going to extend your survival for so long.
My only
all your
with
canned
that-
food,
lasts a long time, doesn't it?
all your canned
Oh,
food
my-
and everything, that's going to be covered on the outside with contamination, most likely, unless it's in a
Yeah.
sealed area. So it's optimistic, but
My only thought with that is, I think throughout civilization, whether you believe in New Earth or Old Earth or however many generations came before you, I think modern man has faced far less struggles as our ancestors have. So humans are resilient. And my only thought is, you know, you don't know what you're capable of until you're backed into a corner. So I
Very
wouldn't be
true.
so pessimistic about it.
I personally think that it's just going to really depend on a lot of these factors, like what we talked about. How close really are you to the blast area? And then do you have time to actually get out? And if you can get out, if you can beat some of that fallout, do you have somewhere to go that's not going to be contaminated by the fallout? A lot of stuff like that too. So I think it would just depend on what are we doing based on what do we observe at that time, and hopefully you'll be able to figure it out. I mean, there's a lot of those factors that we're not going to know. Where was it detonated? If it's happened, we're not going to know if it was sky, ground, exactly where it was or whatever. Like, I mean, we probably have some targets, maybe military bases and major cities and things like that, but who knows if it starts to get in sort of this cacophony of war, then, and they're just launching everywhere, then who knows where they may strike, So I think there's just so many variables.
Yeah,
Keel,
I think there would be a lot of ad
couple
lib.
Sorry, Star, you carry on.
Oh, I'm sorry, mate. I think there would be a lot of ad lib.
Mm-hmm.
You could only plan so much, but at the time, could you think straight enough for all that? Yeah. You're not going to get much warning.
Right.
Sorry, Terry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to mention that Keel, was it a couple of episodes back, mentioned one of my favourite books by one of my favourite authors, which was On the Beach by Neville Shute.
No way.
And it's very relevant to this topic because, and Stella might be interested in this. I don't know if you've read it, Stella, but there's a big nuclear war and the fallout's washing its way over the world, and everyone ends up hiding away in Australia, down in Melbourne at the southern bit, and waiting for the radiation to sort of wash over them. And there's a American nuclear sub commander who's sort of taken refuge there, and he goes out on a mission to sort of investigate this strange radio signal. It's a very good book and quite a good film as well. And it's just sort of very sad whether that's going to be the scenario that basically the whole world gets wiped out and we're just clinging on in a corner waiting for the inevitable end.
Mm-hmm.
What was the name of that, Terry?
On the Beach.
On the Beach. Okay.
Is that during
Neville
like
Shute,
Chernobyl and stuff like that?
Neville Shute's a great writer, I think. He's one of my favorites.
Was that during
Sorry,
like Chernobyl?
No, it's hypothetical, kind of modern times fiction. I don't remember when it was written, Terry, but
in the 50s, I think.
Okay.
He's quite an old writer. He was writing in the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Yeah, it was
Sounds
an interesting scenario he had set up. It was like the trade winds around the globe had spared Australia, but the fallout was winding its way down that way. So
Yeah.
Everybody in the book, all the characters knew it was coming, so they were just kind of living out their lives, as best they could.
They were sort of very sort of British stiff upper lip about it, really, sort of, being very brave in the face of this adversity. It's
If that were the case, I do believe that humans would survive. I mean, we're creative people, and the strive to survive is strong. So I do believe that. I think,
and I
don't know if
think
anybody else has Graham Hancock's idea of civilization comes and goes. I think this is just a peak.
I think that's very likely. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and I don't think that every human, is built genetically the same. So there's going to be some people where that kind of fallout isn't going to kill right away. There's going to be
genetically
survivors.
resistant. Yep, genetically resistant to be able to drink the water, and I agree.
And hope that there's some fertile people that survive.
Yeah. So who knows? But maybe it doesn't. I wonder though if we are, they have the whole what is it called? The nuclear clock or whatever it is that counts down to war.
Yes. The doomsday
The
clock.
doomsday clock. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Which is that whole thing's bullshit, but and politically,
Absolutely.
that's crap.
It's-
But I wonder, in reality, are we closer to nuclear war nowadays than we were back in the 60s during the, you know,
like the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Cuban Missile Crisis and all that stuff? Is that, I mean,
I don't think they would really be willing to pull the trigger on it. Like,
know if
because
they-
they would destroy themselves too. You know,
well, that's
they
the
that-
thing. If Putin, if it would all come from Putin thinking he's being attacked, you know, if he thinks he's pushed into a corner and NATO and America and all the rest are attacking him, I mean, wouldn't we do the same if we thought a nuclear power was directly attacking us?
Mhm.
Wouldn't we react in that way?
There's some stories from the Cold War that we actually came very close on a few occasions. There's a famous one from a Russian missile guy, and his radar was showing all these incoming missiles coming towards Russia. And if he'd followed his orders, he was supposed to launch his own missiles. And he thought, I'm not going to take a chance on destroying the world on what could be an error on this computer. And it did turn out to be an error on the computer. So, you know, this guy supposedly saved the world by not following his orders, but it could have easily gone the other way.
I heard a very similar story about a Russian submarine that was tooling around the American embargo of Cuba during the missile crisis era, and the American ships found the submarine and started dropping signal depth charges to tell him to come up, you know, and identify himself. But the Russians in the submarine, they hadn't had any contact with Moscow in days, and they thought they were being attacked. And so by chance, normally there's two captains on the submarine that have to make this decision, but there happened to be three on this particular submarine. And all three of them had to agree to launch their one nuclear torpedo they had on that ship. And two out of the three said, we're being attacked. The war's already started. We got to do it. And the third guy said, hey, let's wait a minute. Let's surface and go talk to Moscow first. So they did that. And turns out, of course, there wasn't a war already going on. But that story got shuffled away into the Soviet archives until, you know, the wall fell and everything. And that story didn't come out until the early 2000s. And that one guy has since been hailed as the man that saved the world. But when his crew returned to Moscow, they were all chastised and criticized for not following strict Russian protocol, which said something like, if you're discovered as a submarine, you're supposed to scuttle the submarine instead of surfacing and identifying yourself. But
that's interesting, because it sort of reminds me a little bit of another scenario we've been through recently, where it's always necessary to have a hero, but how many times does that hero turn out to be a scapegoat? I'm thinking specifically about the nursing staff and etc. at this point.
That's a
quite a
great,
few times, I think.
great point.
Yeah.
Just to go back to something I was saying earlier about the wave that comes out first, it's called the precursor. That's a very destructive part of the bomb detonating, or the precursor. That is the most destructive part, apparently.
Are there any
Allegedly.
documentaries or anything that you guys would recommend that you've seen to help, you know, give some information or something like that to people?
watch the Trinity documentary.
Trinity and Beyond, it's called.
Yeah, hosted by or narrated by Bill Shatner. It's a classic.
Yeah.
And they can find it on YouTube.
Yep.
I was very interested in the American scientist Richard Feynman, who's a very interesting guy, very entertaining. And he worked on the World War II atom bomb project, the Manhattan Project. And so there's quite a few interesting programs about him. And what he used to say about he was sort of riven with grief about what he helped to achieve. And he said that he used to sort of go for cups of coffee in cafes in New York soon after the end of the Second World War. And he was sort of thinking, why are these, you could see building works going on. And he was sort of thinking, why are they bothering building these buildings when obviously the world is going to get destroyed in the next few years? He was very pessimistic about it, having witnessed it at close hand. So that was quite an interesting take. And I think Oppenheimer was similar, actually. He was like the head guy for the Manhattan Project. He was very sort of torn up about what he'd done as well.
Wasn't he the guy that wrote I have become the destroyer of worlds or whatever? It was his little quip he gave after they detonated the
great quote,
the first one.
Mm.
I have become death, destroyer of worlds.
That's right. Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he die a natural death? Do you know?
I think all those guys died
Oppenheimer?
of cancer, didn't they?
A lot of them did. Yeah.
Mm. I have a question, and I'd love to get you guys' opinion on this. Something sort of struck me about this whole nuclear thing. Now, we were talking in another episode about how war is generally more about business than it is about peacekeeping, and often started through, well, I think nearly every time, started through false flags. It's orchestrated. So in that sense, let's assume that's true and everything is completely controlled. It would not be necessary to have nuclear weaponry. The only necessary thing about it would be to keep the world in perpetual fear. That's their biggest weapon.
Yeah.
Nukes are fake.
I am not disagreeing 100% with you there, Toons.
I mean, the only reason to have a nuclear arsenal is to protect is to, persuade other nations with nuclear arsenals not to use their nuclear arsenal against you. That's the main purpose of having one.
My arsenal was bigger than your arsenal. Does
It
my
is-
arsenal look big in this?
There you go.
Your arsenal looks great.
Thanks, Bob.
I suppose you could argue it's been quite successful from that point of view because we haven't had a nuclear war since the bombs were dropped in World War II.
We
My
don't
thought on
need
that
to.
topic. Yeah. So if the U.S. develops a nuclear bomb, and that is the I win button, you're playing Risk. That is the I win button. Wouldn't, as soon as any other power, whether it's allied or oppositional, whatever, friend or foe, as soon as they start to develop a nuke, wouldn't you just press the I win button? Because I have the I win button, I'm just gonna press it. If nukes are real,
I think you'd have to create a situation wherein the people that you govern are okay with you doing that.
and they've never done that before, right?
Well,
the official story, and I'm not saying I believe it, was that the Americans weren't aware that Russians had the nuclear weapon until they tested it. And then it would, then you could say, well, it's too late now, they've got it. So,
Well, that was after the treaty, wasn't it? There was a treaty called, or was it before that? There was a treaty called, after they sort of realized how powerful these things are. And then Russia apparently let off a bomb after the year of the treaty.
The test ban treaty to ban nuclear tests. I think that was a bit later, wasn't it? I'm not really sure.
That was after they'd done stacks of tests.
Yeah. I think the Russians had the nuclear bomb quite early, didn't they?
pretty quick.
Late 40s?
Not 100% sure on that one.
48, maybe,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
something like that.
Well, the US were conducting tests between 1945 and 1962, apparently, the atmospheric tests. And then I think they were banished to just underground tests.
Right.
And then we went to the moon.
That's right.
Or not.
Let's nuke the moon.
Allegedly.
Okay, so Keel.
Now, sorry, I was going to say something else. There's an interesting theory knocking around the internet that basically the Americans or the Saudis, their allies, have used tactical nukes against the help me out here. What war are they involved in?
Yemen.
Somebody? Yemen. Thank you. Against the Yemenis. And I've seen some film and they certainly look like extremely powerful explosives. And, you know, we know that they can develop extremely powerful explosives, but somebody said, oh, this looks like a tactical nuke to me. Somebody who supposedly knew what he was talking about. So there's a possibility that these have been used already.
Yeah. That was I think one of Tom Clancy's novels suggested that the Israelis had nuclear armed fighter bombers that were during one of their wars with their neighbors. Movie was based, I can't remember which one it was, but one of the planes was shot down and the bomb was still there buried in the sand, and then somebody came back later and extracted the fissionable material out of it and sold it to some terrorist, and then they nuked some city in America. That was the premise of the movie. So I don't know. It's a rumor that all those guys have been throwing nukes at each other. So who knows?
Yeah.
I'm actually hoping that military intelligence is intelligent enough to make sure that Biden has a pretend button in front of him. But when they were doing a test, it was called the Big One in 1954, Castle Bravo was called. There was a very, very, very large detonation. It was 2.5 times larger than the previous one. And apparently, allegedly, there was a Japanese fishing boat in the vicinity that was, in air commas, not noticed in the original clearing zone. This resulted in, obviously, these fishing crew were severely burned, etc. The footage was released and it was actually quoted as saying, "This put the concept of fallout into the public mind." What does that sound like to you? Starts with a P. Propaganda, man.
And ends with agenda.
Yeah.
I was going to say it
Starts
ends
with a
with a
prop and
Y.
ends in agenda.
I thought it might be a psyop. Yeah.
Well, and that. Yeah, we
Interesting.
don't know. We don't know. I mean, how did those people survive? If that's, if radiation, I don't know.
Well, if they were far enough away
Wasn't
from
there.
it,
If they were
You
far
would-
enough away, they could have done
you would
it.
only get burned. You wouldn't get vaporized.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how far away they were
I mean, it's
from
plausible.
ground zero.
It's plausible they're clearing the area, but they just weren't being thorough enough with their radar, and that boat was far enough away that they just didn't notice it.
Okay,
Well-
so they didn't notice a fishing boat and when they're supposed to be clearing an area. So I shudder to think that these same people have that much power in their hands.
Hey,
Well, I mean,
Couldn't do
they
something
don't
simple like
mind,
that?
yeah.
They don't mind testing nukes on members of their own military, do they? They've famously done that a few times in the New Mexico area. So I don't suppose they worry about foreign fishing boats too much. They
That's
probably
what
don't
I was
care that
thinking.
much.
It's very just as likely that they knew what
Yes.
they were doing and that they allowed it to happen because they were like, fuck it, let's see. Let's see what happens. They
That's
don't care.
exactly, yes, that's exactly what I thought too, Ashley.
Yeah. And it's what, we see that happening over and over and over again with a lot of experiments that are being done on humans. As
Yeah.
we know that they don't care who is harmed by,
It's for the
whatever
greater
they got.
good.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, I almost had like a visionary flash of the generals all standing around and someone saying, Sir, there's a fishing boat in the we have to stop. And the general just going, no, let's just leave it. Let's
Nuke
just see.
them.
Let's go.
Nuke them.
Just go
Yeah.
with it.
That's it.
Keel, sorry, Stella. Go ahead.
No, I've finished.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, Keel, did you finish your list, your recommendations?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all covered.
Okay, perfect. The other thing, maybe we can post that on our website or post it on a second page of our show notes or something like that, so people will have that information. And then the other thing was, do we have some other sites that might be helpful, like a site that would say, okay, how much is the recommended iodine to take, that kind of thing. And then the other thing I was hoping that maybe we could touch on, if we do have enough time, is to talk about some of the other, the fear around the word nuclear, and because there's an association with nuclear power plants being dangerous and nuclear bombs and that kind of stuff. I don't know that much about it, but
I can give you a website.
okay.
It is the Health Physics Society. This is a website my brother quotes to me when he is tired of me asking him questions about stuff like that. HPS.org, the Health Physics Society. They have a search bar and you can type in all sorts of different questions, and they have articles and all sorts of different things for browsing.
Okay.
Wonder who runs that website.
It, according to my brother, it's not a government related thing. It's an independent organization run by scientists. And we all know how reliable scientists are these days.
I think
Us the scientists.
I think we should do an offshoot and have Keel and his brother on here talking about some things, because I think I would be interested in listening to you two go back and forth.
Yeah.
Well, maybe next time me and him are having a few drinks, I'll hit record on my phone.
Press record and share it for us.
Right.
It sounds like Keel's brother makes Keel look like a really crazy conspiracy theorist.
Well, I swear there's different, well, we've had plenty of great conversations along those lines.
Is your
Yeah.
brother like in similar thought to you about the whole pandemic, or are you guys a little bit like, are you like a little bit more, as other people would say, kind of like crazier about it? You know?
I'd hate to speak for him, but I know at least initially we were not on the same page. I wasn't with my entire family was really pushing for me to get vaccinated and all this stuff. And nowadays, even my parents, my dad was telling me the other day, he said, he said, well, I guess you were right about this whole time, and
Wow, that's
and
great.
it was
Wow.
it was a what do you call it?
Awakening?
Hmm?
Like
that?
an awakening, or like a
No, I was gonna say it was a moment where I felt
Vindicated.
vindicated. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's probably bittersweet though, eh? Like it's a little late to be right about that,
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Nothing.
thankfully my family didn't have any sort of tragedy due to the COVID situation. So,
That's good.
there wasn't a whole lot of, well, if we had known back then kind of stuff. I mean, everybody went and got vaccinated and all this stuff, and they're fine. Nobody was harmed by any of that.
They
So I'm
didn't stop
thankful.
talking to you or segregate from you either.
No,
right?
they didn't do anything like that either. My
Yeah.
family's pretty rational, so it's
Yeah.
not like they freaked out and ostracized me or anything. But they were genuinely concerned for my health and my family's health. And but there were a few conversations back then that were stressful for me, at least.
I'd like to
Yeah.
just tip
It's
my akubra to
challenging.
you for that. In fact, I'd like to tip my akubra to all of us for standing strong, holding the line.
We made it.
Definitely.
All right.
We did it.
Definitely.
As
We
Biden
fought through
said,
all the threats.
Yeah.
the pandemic is over.
It hasn't come without loss. I've lost a lot of people out of my life. A lot
Yes.
of people I love very much who now think I'm completely insane. I very much doubt any of them will ever come back and say you were right, but I don't care about that. I just want them to be okay.
Yeah.
I just wish they knew how much I love them and how much I sacrificed because I care about them. We've all been there. I'm not just saying it's me, but that was my experience.
No, that's really good, Stella. That's nice. I still I have some resentment still about all these crazies, really, because they've forced us into a bad situation. And whenever I go out and see people still wearing masks in the street when it's it's not mandated here anymore in Spain, it was in the past. I just think you crazies are going to force us into another bloody lockdown. What the hell are you doing? Wise up, God's sake.
Yeah.
So I still get very angry about it.
Yeah. I don't hold it against anybody for any of the decisions that they made during the past couple of years. What really breaks my heart is the idea that we weren't allowed to do things. We weren't allowed to make our own decisions. And if there's a brand new vaccine and you feel like you need to go get it because you're at risk, I say go for it. That's you feel that's right for your family and your life and your whatever your decision wants to be. I mean, why can't we all just make our own decisions about these things and let the chips fall where they may?
Totally okay with that.
We're all gonna make it, and we're all gonna be smarter about it in the end because we'll have a control group.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you just want
to start to wrap up. Sorry, Toons, I'll let you say what you're going to say.
No, I was just going to say Keel just wants a new grandma.
That is I think that should be the title of the episode.
Yeah,
great.
Did it.
Beautiful, beautiful.
New or nuke?
Nuke. Don't nuke grandma.
Nope.
Yeah, no, I'm all about personal choice. So we should sort of wrap up. So to bring it back to our topic, if anyone offers you a vaccine against nuclear fallout, I would be somewhat skeptical about whether you should take it or not.
Yeah.
If it doesn't have
Don't suggest that.
nuclear iodine in it, I'm not taking it.
Even if Fauci recommends it, think twice.
Especially if he recommends it.
Yeah,
Yes.
that makes sense. So thanks everyone for joining us on this interesting topic, and look forward to joining you all again and joining all our fans and our listeners next time on Union of the Unknowns. So let's all say bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Farewell.
Don't lose hope. The nukers are all full of hot air.
And we made it and we survived. We weren't forced to get into what we did not want to do. We fought back and we won so far.
Yes.
All right, you
Yes.
guys, have a great evening.
You
Love ya.
too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Union of the Unknowns. You can find new episodes every week on all your favorite podcasting networks.